When we first looked at the results, it was astonishing. We've had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object. It's such a clever, extraordinary, sophisticated machine. Completely shocking for ancient Greece.
It was the remains of a coral-encrusted wooden and bronze box that, curiously, looked like a clock.
A claim has been spreading online for years now. It says that a device pulled from a shipwreck off the coast of Greece is so advanced, so impossibly precise, that it shouldn't exist in the ancient world at all. Some say it points to alien involvement. Others say it proves a lost civilization once walked the earth. So today, we're looking at what the actual evidence shows about the Antikythera Mechanism and whether it really is the impossible machine the internet says it is. The device that shouldn't exist. In October of 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers were sheltering from a storm near a tiny island called Antikythera. When the weather cleared, one of the divers went down to look around the seabed. What he found changed how we think about the ancient world. He had stumbled onto a Roman-era shipwreck. The vessel had gone down somewhere around 60 BCE, give or take a few decades, and it was loaded with cargo. Bronze statues, marble figures, glassware, jewelry, coins. The kind of haul that would have made any wealthy Roman collector very happy if it had ever reached its destination. But among all of that, divers eventually pulled up something else, something nobody recognized. It was a corroded lump of bronze fused together by 2,000 years on the ocean floor. At first, it looked like a random piece of debris. Then it cracked open. And inside, archaeologists saw something that didn't make sense to them at all. Gears. Tiny, precisely cut gears. Dozens of them, locked together inside a wooden case the size of a shoebox. That is the object we now call the Antikythera Mechanism. And from the moment people understood what they were looking at, the questions began. Because as far as anyone knew, the ancient Greeks weren't supposed to have anything like this. Geared machinery on this level wouldn't show up again in the historical record for more than 1,000 years. For decades, the lump sat in a museum in Athens, mostly ignored. The corrosion was so heavy that nobody could really see what was inside. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that researchers began applying serious imaging techniques to it, and only in the 2000s, when scientists used high-resolution X-ray tomography, that the full structure came into focus. What they saw under the rust was so detailed, it took specialists from several different fields to even begin describing it. So how did this thing exist, and what was it actually for? What people online are saying. If you search for the Antikythera Mechanism today, you'll find no shortage of dramatic claims. Some videos describe it as technology that simply could not have existed in 100 BCE. Others go further. They suggest the device proves that ancient humans had help from somewhere else, whether that means visitors from another planet or survivors of an advanced civilization that vanished before recorded history began. A common version of the story goes something like this. The mechanism is supposedly so far ahead of its time that it makes no sense as a product of ancient Greek engineering. The gears are too precise. The mathematics behind them is too sophisticated. The whole thing looks more like a medieval clock than anything from the Roman era. And since nothing remotely similar shows up again for over 1,000 years, some argue the only explanation is that the knowledge to build it came from outside the normal flow of human history. You'll see comparisons to clocks built in 14th century Europe. You'll see claims that the device used principles people weren't supposed to understand for another 1,500 years. And you'll often see the word impossible attached to it, as if researchers themselves can't account for how it was made. These claims spread for understandable reasons. The mechanism really is visually striking. Its inner workings are difficult to grasp at a glance. Early news coverage leaned heavily into the mystery angle, and that framing stuck. The fact that nothing else like it has ever been recovered from the same period only adds to the sense that something doesn't add up. But when you sit down and look at what scientists, historians, and engineers have actually learned about this object, the picture shifts. The mystery doesn't disappear. It just becomes a different kind of mystery. What the device actually is. After more than a century of study, with the help of imaging technology that didn't exist when the mechanism was first found, researchers have a fairly clear understanding of what they're looking at. The Antikythera Mechanism is a hand-cranked astronomical calculator. Inside its wooden case sat a system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. When you turned a knob on the side, those gears moved a series of pointers across dials on the front and back of the device. Each pointer tracked something different. One showed the position of the sun against the background of stars. Another showed the moon, including its phase, which it displayed using a small rotating ball that was painted half black and half white. Other dials tracked planetary motion, the timing of solar and lunar eclipses, and even the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. In other words, this was a working model of the heavens as the Greeks understood them. Turn the crank forward, and you could see what the sky would look like next month. Turn it backward, and you could check what eclipse happened a generation ago. Researchers studying the surviving fragments have identified roughly 30 separate gears, with strong evidence that the original device had even more. Some of those gears interact in genuinely clever ways, including a pin and slot arrangement that mimics the irregular speed of the moon as it travels across the sky. That irregular motion was something Greek astronomers had described mathematically. The mechanism turned that math into bronze. The precision of the gear ratios is what most impresses modern engineers. The teeth on the gears were cut by hand, which means the person who made them had to be working at a level of craftsmanship that very few people would ever achieve. Some of the smaller gears have teeth barely a millimeter apart, cut with a consistency that allowed the whole system to keep its mathematical accuracy across long stretches of simulated time. Was that level of skill rare? Almost certainly. Was it impossible? That's where the evidence starts to push back against the more dramatic claims. The Greek science behind it. To understand whether the mechanism is truly out of place in its era, you have to look at what Greek scholars actually knew at the time it was built. By the 2nd century BCE, Greek astronomy was already remarkably advanced. Scholars in places like Alexandria and Rhodes had spent generations charting the night sky, calculating the length of the year, and tracking the movements of the planets. The astronomer Hipparchus, working in the 100s BCE, is credited with discovering the precession of the equinoxes and producing detailed star catalogs. The mathematical traditions of figures like Archimedes, who lived a century earlier, included sophisticated work on geometry, ratios, and mechanical devices. Ancient writers also describe complex mechanical contraptions. Cicero, the Roman statesman, mentions a device built by Archimedes that modeled the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. He describes it as something that could demonstrate eclipses and celestial movements with mechanical accuracy. For a long time, that passage was treated almost as a legend because no surviving artifact backed it up. The Antikythera Mechanism appears to be exactly the kind of object Cicero was describing. Not a one-off miracle, but the kind of instrument that learned writers in the Greek and Roman world already knew existed. When researchers compare the astronomical models built into the gears with what Greek mathematicians had written down by that point, the two line up. The cycles the device tracks are cycles Greek astronomers had already calculated. The mathematical relationships hidden in the gear ratios match the kind of work scholars of that era were doing on paper. There's nothing in the mechanism that requires knowledge the Greeks didn't already have. If you found this look at the evidence interesting so far, take a second to subscribe. We dig into ancient mysteries like this one every week, and we always come at them through what the research actually shows, rather than the loudest claim online. Now back to it. The question of who made it. One of the things people find most surprising about the Antikythera Mechanism is that we don't know who built it. There's no signature, no maker's mark that researchers have been able to confirm. The shipwreck doesn't come with a manifest, but there are clues. Inscriptions on the device itself, written in Koine Greek, describe how to use it and what its different dials track. Studies of these inscriptions, including the calendar names used on one of the dials, point researchers toward the Greek world, with some evidence suggesting a possible link to Corinth or its colonies. The astronomical settings appear calibrated for a latitude consistent with the Mediterranean. A few researchers have proposed connections to specific known scholars, including the School of Hipparchus on the island of Rhodes. These connections remain proposals rather than confirmed facts. What is generally accepted is that the device almost certainly came from a Greek workshop, was made by people who had access to current astronomical knowledge, and was probably one of several similar instruments produced over time. That last point matters. Most discussions of the mechanism treat it as a one-of-a-kind object. The evidence suggests it probably wasn't. Why it feels like the only one here is the part that often gets left out of online videos. The reason the Antikythera Mechanism feels like a freak event in history is not because nothing else like it ever existed. It's because almost nothing else like it survived. Bronze is recyclable. Throughout the ancient and medieval world, bronze objects were routinely melted down and reused. Statues were reduced to weapons, tools were melted into coins. A delicate astronomical instrument sitting in a Greek scholar's home for a few generations was, eventually, just a chunk of metal someone could turn into something else. The Antikythera Mechanism survived for one specific reason. The ship carrying it sank. Once it hit the seabed, it was buried in sediment and forgotten. The same conditions that destroyed most of the bronze cargo around it ended up preserving it just enough that 20th century scientists could study it. Without that shipwreck, we would have no physical example of this kind of device at all. We would only have the written descriptions from people like Cicero, and many modern readers would probably dismiss those descriptions as ancient exaggeration. The lesson here is important. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The fact that we haven't found a second mechanism doesn't mean a second mechanism never existed. It means the conditions needed to preserve one are extremely rare. The gap that isn't quite a gap. The most popular version of the impossible mechanism story leans heavily on the idea of a 1,000-year gap. The argument goes that nothing as advanced as this device shows up again until the medieval astronomical clocks of Europe, and that gap proves something strange is going on. Historians who study the long arc of mechanical knowledge see the picture differently. Geared devices and astronomical instruments didn't simply disappear after the Roman era. They moved. Greek scientific knowledge passed into the Islamic world, where scholars in places like Baghdad, Damascus, and Andalusia continued to study and refine astronomical instruments through the medieval period. Geared astrolabes and intricate water clocks were built in this tradition. From there, the knowledge eventually made its way into medieval and Renaissance Europe, where it helped shape the great mechanical clocks people often compare to the Antikythera Mechanism. So the line is not as broken as it looks. It bends. It moves through different cultures and languages. It loses some pieces along the way and gains others. What looks like a 1,000-year silence in Western Europe is really a long, complicated transmission of ideas across a much wider region. It's also worth noting that the Antikythera Mechanism, for all its complexity, is doing something different from a medieval clock. A clock measures the passage of time using regular mechanical motion. The mechanism is a calculator and model. The two devices are related in their use of gears, but they're not the same kind of machine. Comparing them directly tends to overstate how alike they are. What the evidence does not support. It's worth being clear about a few things the research has not found. There is no evidence in the materials, the design, or the construction of the Antikythera Mechanism that points to non-human origins. The bronze is consistent with metal produced in the ancient Mediterranean. The gear cutting techniques are consistent with what skilled ancient craftsmen could achieve with simple tools and patience. The astronomical knowledge encoded in the gears is consistent with the work Greek scholars had already published. There is also no solid evidence of a forgotten super-civilization standing behind the device. The mathematical and astronomical context for the mechanism exists in surviving Greek texts. The calendar, the eclipse cycles, the planetary models, all of it has roots that historians can trace. And the device is not beyond the reach of human capability for its era. It is the work of a very skilled craftsman applying knowledge that was already available in his world. Extraordinary, yes. Impossible, no. What researchers generally agree on. If you read through the work of the scholars who have spent decades studying this object, a fairly steady picture emerges. The Antikythera Mechanism is one of the most sophisticated surviving artifacts from the ancient world. Its complexity is real, and its precision is impressive even by modern standards. It represents the high end of what Greek science and craftsmanship could produce. It was likely not unique in its time, but it is unique among the objects we have managed to recover. It stretches our understanding of ancient technology, and it should. It does not, however, require any explanation beyond the people, ideas, and tools that already existed in its era. Most researchers describe it as a peak example of Hellenistic engineering, not as an anomaly that breaks history. The mystery isn't whether ancient people could have built it. They clearly did. The mystery is how much other knowledge like this once existed and has simply been lost to time, recycling, and the slow erosion of 2,000 years. What this really tells us. So where does that leave the original question? Was the Antikythera mechanism too advanced for its time? Based on the evidence, the most accurate answer is no. It was advanced. It was rare. It was the product of unusually skilled hands and unusually deep knowledge. But it fits within what historians and scientists understand about the Greek world that produced it. The materials, the math, the astronomy, and the craftsmanship all line up with that era. What it does do, and what makes it so valuable, is force a more honest picture of the ancient world. We sometimes assume that earlier societies were simple, that real technology only began with the modern age. The mechanism is a quiet correction to that assumption. It tells us that 2,000 years ago, somewhere in the Greek-speaking world, someone sat down with a piece of bronze and a sharp tool and built a working model of the heavens accurate enough to predict eclipses generations into the future. That isn't a sign of aliens or lost civilizations. It's a sign that human ingenuity has been with us a lot longer than we sometimes give it credit for. The next time you see a video calling this object impossible, remember the part of the story that often gets left out. The shipwreck, the sediment, the bronze that didn't get melted down, the instrument that survived by accident when so many of its likely siblings did not. The Antikythera mechanism isn't impossible. It's a survivor. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation. We've got more upcoming videos that take a careful look at the ancient world's biggest claims, including a few that sound just as wild as this one and turn out to have surprisingly grounded explanations. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think more devices like the Antikythera mechanism are still out there waiting to be found, buried in shipwrecks or sitting unrecognized in some museum storage room? Or do you think this one really is a rare, lucky survivor of a kind of knowledge that mostly disappeared? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read them.